Dr. Alice Honigan, welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Rich. How are
Well,
you?
I'm doing well, and I'm really blessed to meet you finally, and to finally have an opportunity to have you share all about bioenergetic healing for Lyme disease. So
Yes, sir.
I wanted to put that little teaser out there for folks. But I'm also excited because I'm getting to see an old friend, Heather Glovack, who's joining me as a guest co-host today. So Heather, thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me as a guest co-host.
Of course. I'm always excited to be here.
Hi,
Well, thank
Heather.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, Dr. Honigan, why don't you first share with us where you're practicing and what is the name of your practice?
All right. So my name's Alice Honican, and I practice at Longevity Health Center in Roswell, Georgia, which is north of Atlanta. And I am also the co-owner of the practice with my sister, Melina. And we took over the practice a year ago from my parents. So Seneca Anderson and Kay Anderson started Longevity in about 1980. And it's kind of an interesting story because my parents met in 1970 at a macrobiotic healing community in Boston, Massachusetts, where they studied macrobiotic medicine. Have you heard of macrobiotics
I
before?
have not, so please
No.
share with us because that was going to be my next question. What is a macrobiotic?
So my parents were a couple of hippies, and my dad was studying acupuncture, actually. He went to the first accredited acupuncture school in the country, and he really liked, the Asian way of eating. And my mom started studying macrobiotic because she wasn't feeling well. She started having joint pain at a young age. So they went to move into this healing center all about macrobiotic cooking, which is a Japanese style of eating according to yin and yang. And it's a lot of rules. It's no sugar, no dairy, a lot of brown rice and vegetables and seaweed. And my mom got well from her chronic pain issues, and my dad just loved to learn about it. So they met and fell in love, and they moved to Georgia and started a health center. So my dad had a acupuncture degree, but at that time there was no licensing in Georgia for acupuncturists. So there is now. But so he did a little acupuncture, and my mom was teaching macrobiotic classes to other hippies in the area. And then my dad started taking trips to Germany and started studying what is known as German New Medicine or bioenergetic medicine. And it really stems from homeopathy and traditional Chinese medicine. So I can explain a little bit about it. So Dr. Ball is known as being the founder of bioenergetic medicine, German physician. And what he would do was use an electronic, like volt type of meter energy detector to measure different acupuncture points. And then he would have the patients hold different homeopathic remedies. So let's say he was measuring your kidney energy and your kidney point that reflects the energy state of your kidneys, and your kidneys test weak, and the patient was holding on to a vial to help you detox mercury, and that balanced the kidney energy. This doctor would know that mercury toxicity was what was impacting the kidneys. So now this type of testing has become computerized.
So help us with that because we've had many guests share that they've used this tool as a vehicle for both diagnosing and treating various illnesses. How does holding a vial in one hand register with the tool that's being used to measure? For example, you were using an example of a kidney. How give us give
So
some more.
we could, for example, do something like autonomic nervous response testing or muscle testing, where we could have maybe you put your arm out and we could measure the strength of your arm, like, push down on your arm. Is it strong or weak? You could put your hand on the back of your kidneys, and if your arm goes weak, then we know your kidneys are weak. And then we could put different herbs in your hand to see if that makes the kidneys strong. But now technology's come a long way. Now, actually, they're computerized circuits, kind of like when you take your car to the mechanic, the light goes on in your car. You're not feeling well. Your car's not feeling well. You plug it into the computer at the circuit at the mechanic, and it scans your car. We can use that type of computerized technology to scan your body. You basically would hold on to different brass conductors and then connect the patient's body to the computer circuit and run through a set of frequencies. For example, is your body resonating with Lyme spirochetes, gluten sensitivities, magnesium deficiency, we can ask your body using bioenergetic testing, hundreds and hundreds of questions in a very fast, quick time, and get the results right then. And the results might change from day to day. For example, if you ate popcorn at the movie theater, corn sensitivity might show up that day. But sometimes we get to deep issues, even childhood toxins such as vaccines or heavy metals that patients have had for a long time.
So this is fascinating. I know Heather's probably fascinated by it as well, but can you give us a little bit more detail on what's happening? Is it so are we closing a circuit by holding something in each hand, and then there's an electrical current that's going through our body? Give me more detail on this.
Yeah, so the patient is holding a brass hand mass conductor in each hand that is connected to the computerized testing modality, and that creates the circuit. And then the energy signals are sent through the body, and your body will respond negatively or positively to that energy circuit. So basically, like everything has an energetic frequency. Our bodies are energy. So there's a frequency for the adrenal glands, or a frequency for a virus. And then as that frequency runs through your body, if you respond negatively to that, it's a clue that that's what's going on. And then we can get an actual report and then decide what to do with that information. But really, it blows my mind every day. The information I'll get, somebody won't even tell me something, and I'll say, "Oh, looks like you have a urinary tract infection," and they'll say, "Oh, I forgot to mention that." And every day, the answers, blow my mind. I can't always guess what someone's going to show with, but sometimes I can. When it comes to something like Lyme spirochetes, like sometimes I can guess that they're going to show based on their symptoms. But anyway, so we started perfecting this type of testing. My dad, Dr. Anderson, he used a test called the Vega test. And patients were coming from far and wide, all over, North Atlanta area and all over, the Southeast to see him for things like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. So I kind of grew up with parents where natural medicine was the first approach, not the last approach. So we were considered a little odd back then. We didn't vaccinate. We didn't eat sugar. We, took homeopathics and herbs when we were sick. Only took antibiotics. I've never actually even taken one. I mean, I know they're there for me if I need them.
Oh, never once.
So yeah, I grew up natural. So I decided at a very young age to follow my dad's footsteps. So I took a big interest in becoming a healer and a naturopath. Well, you as a lawyer, the politics are a little tricky because in Georgia, they still don't recognize naturopaths by the Georgia Medical Board. So my dad said, "You need to become an acupuncturist," because at that point, acupuncture was recognized. So I went off to acupuncture school in San Diego and loved it and had a great experience at acupuncture school. It was a 4-year master's program. I studied herbs and acupuncture. And then I came back and joined the practice in 2006. And I really didn't know a lot about Lyme disease at all. I mean, in acupuncture school, we, maybe one course mentioned, knee pain and talking about Lyme disease. That was about it. And so I was sitting in with my dad, and patients were coming in and complaining of a multitude of health symptoms. And he was testing them using this bioenergetic device he used called the Vega test. And he was mostly detecting spirochetes. And I didn't know what the heck they were. So then I went to deep dive into what are these spirochetes. As naturopaths and acupuncturists, we're not allowed to say you have Lyme disease. So it gets a little tricky for us to find what's going on. And yeah.
So Dr. Honican, let me walk you back a little bit. There's some stuff I'd like to build out for you, and I'm sure Heather will have some questions as well. So when your dad was, I guess he's one of the pioneers in this, at least in the US, did he go to Germany to receive his training for the bioenergetic?
He took many trips to Germany, and so Dr. Reinhard Ball pioneered bioenergetic testing, and then Dr. Schimmel learned under Dr. Ball, and my dad studied under Dr. Schimmel. So he was one of the first bioenergetic practitioners in the world.
So how did, I mean, again, I sort of have this vision of what it's like in Georgia now. I can't imagine back when your dad was pioneering these diagnostic and treatment tools. How was he reacted to by first the general community of patients, and how are the medical practitioners responding to your dad as this pioneer?
Well, he kind of liked to live under the radar. We're using different, we have a light beam ray called the Rife machine, Dr. Royal Rife, who discovered it, there's rumors that he got murdered. So, I mean, there's definitely, my dad kind of did live a little bit in fear of the medical community coming after him. He did have to go testify in court before that he wasn't diagnosing. So because of his history, he didn't want that to happen to me. He said, you need to make sure you have a professional license. So since then, I've gone back and got my doctorate. So in Georgia, I have I'm a doctor in the state of Georgia to practice medicine, but still I have to be really careful about diagnosing disease. And, I think when I joined the practice in 2007 and I was finding patients with spirochetes, nobody had heard of it in Georgia. And it was a little bit, we knew what we were doing, but we were also afraid that they were going to go to their doctors and they were going to come shut us down, that there's no Lyme disease in Georgia.
But let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So you said you grew up in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall ticks and dealing with tick bites during your childhood? And
I definitely recall some, and I think a lot of patients travel, too. But I actually went to a summer camp in Connecticut. I can't remember where, for a month, and I remember coming home with a big tick on my head. My dad burning it off at the time.
Oh,
So I think that in Georgia, maybe there are definitely ticks in Georgia, but maybe not as many as Connecticut. But back in 2007, according to the CDC, there's no Lyme south of the Mason-Dixon line. So that right away, I kind of had to try to understand how to communicate what I'm finding. I'm testing patients, they're not feeling well. I'm finding things like Borrelia and Babesia and Bartonella. But I knew if they went home and Googled it, that I would be considered a quack, that wouldn't be legit. And so, but now things have really changed because of podcasts like yours, because the information's out there. Now their patients are coming and saying, I wonder if I have Lyme disease. Can you let me know if I have spirochetes? So there's been a big shift since 2007 for sure.
Yeah. So I know there has. I mean, I can just tell you in the short time we've been doing this podcast, the amount of awareness in the community generally, and I think a lot of that has to do with celebrities who have been diagnosed with Lyme disease, whether it be the Hadids, who are obviously world famous influencers, or Justin Bieber, and the list goes on and on of all the folks who are who are celebrities of Lyme disease, and that certainly has created a great deal of awareness. But
Sure.
Let's say a little bit more with the challenge you had as a practitioner, right? So you had these parents who had a healing spirit, and they wanted to be healers. They were also pioneers. They wanted to bring new types of diagnostic and treatment modalities to the community. It just doesn't seem like Georgia would be the place, right? I mean, it just seems like, if you want to be a medical pioneer, being in the deep South doesn't really seem like it's the place to be, but they were resilient.
That is a good question. I think my mom actually just wrote her memoir. So I think they moved to Georgia because my father's father, my grandfather, thought acupuncturists were quacks. So he told my dad, well, you should just go to chiropractic school. And so Georgia is known for having one of the best chiropractic schools in the country called Life University. And my dad started there, but he ended up going down the naturopathic route and not sticking to it. So we settled in Georgia, and they just loved it. And I think there's definitely some educated people in Georgia. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. So yeah, he just people just heard about us word of mouth. We weren't using the internet so much, and started really to develop a reputation. And so everything, patients were coming in, we're finding the spirochetes, and some of the hurdles were that when you are a naturopath and an acupuncturist, it's all about balance, and it's not just one thing. I wish it would be so easy that all we had to do was 10 days of doxycycline if we got Lyme disease, or just treat one thing. But really, the bodies are so complex, and so I have to see the patient, find out what's going on, put them on a protocol that can be complex and that they have to pay for out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover it. So there's lots of complexities being a naturopath working with the body, and really trying to have patients understand the body, and that if we can lower the toxic burden and support your immune system, you can handle anything, even the strongest pathogen like Lyme. But it takes some work, and it's even harder because of the food and the water and the toxins and things like that. But I think that if you have the right tools and see the right person, that anybody can recover from Lyme disease. I really believe that.
So, when did your parents, if you know, first start to detect Lyme in Georgia? Was it before you started practicing with your parents?
I think it probably started pretty close to then. I think I would say probably around 2000. And, and then as naturopaths, we're attending the naturopathic conferences every year. And I'm starting to hear doctors like Dr. Cowden, Dr. Klinghardt were my mentors. I actually bought the same bioenergetic machine that Dr. Cowden uses and learned laser energetic detoxification. So he was a pioneer in Lyme disease. And so I think that the bioenergetic approach to detecting spirochetes is new to a lot of your listeners. So naturopathic medicine, bioenergetic medicine, homeopathy has been around a long time. What's newer is functional medicine. That's newer and it's amazing, but just running one test for all the strands of Babesia, Bartonella, Borrelia, Heather, I'm sure you know this can cost thousands of dollars to run that lab test. And it may or may not even show in the blood. The Lyme might be hiding. Yeah.
Yeah, as you were, I've actually done the bioenergetic testing with, I don't know if you know Dr. Gallister in Santa Monica.
No.
But as you were explaining this, I thought of a girl that I worked with who just coincidentally also had Lyme. And she spent tens of thousands of dollars because she was getting a false negative. So then she had to pay more money where she sent her blood to be fermented. And I guess somehow, you can get a clear answer from that. But think about the time and the money when, energy frequency doesn't lie. And I'm sure the cost is so much less and you can get to treatment so much faster.
Exactly. So yeah, to see me, let's just say you're a regular and you came in for a follow-up, it'd be $185, and that would include the results of your lab that day. So you would find out that day if you have aluminum or mercury or gluten sensitivity or B12 deficiency, all based on frequency and energy. And it's truly unbelievable and phenomenal. And then how we make the remedies is also interesting because we use homeopathy and we also use herbs and nutrition and cat's claw and Japanese knotweed and all the great herbs, but homeopathy is a little bit different. And how it works is it's based on energy. So let's say there's a famous homeopathic remedy made from a bee called apis, and you take it when you get stung by an insect and you have itching and swelling. So how that is made is a bee is put into a bottle of alcohol and water. You take one drop out, put it in another bottle of alcohol and water and shake that up. Say you do that 10 times. That's now a homeopathic remedy made from a bee called apis. If you have a sting, you take a few drops of that under your tongue and it gets rid of the symptom. It's in the theory of like treats like. And so there's no side effect. It's just frequency, but it works. And it's hard to understand because it's so different from the traditional now, traditional pharmaceuticals, which are a completely different approach. So homeopathy is amazing, and we can make a specific remedy based on the scan with the frequencies that your body would need. And then you just start to get better. And also we can do this type of testing from your DNA, from a little bit of hair or from a blood spot. So I can see patients in California, all over the country, if they send in their sample and they can get their results over the phone that day instead of waiting for a long time with the lab work that may or may not show.
So help me out with the example you were just giving me with the homeopathy.
Yes.
You said you would, if it were a bee sting, for example, if I was stung by a bee, you'd be able to take the bee that stung me or any bee and
well, no, now they're just manufactured by homeopathic companies that can just buy the remedy and sell it to you. But that's how they're made. They're made from a frequency from the original substance that would give you the harm. So for example, my son, I knew he was going to get the chicken pox because his cousins had it. So I started giving him a homeopathic called HZ cord or herpes zoster cord and put it under his tongue. He was 10 years old. I did that for about a week and he started to get chicken pox and maybe had 3 or 4 pox on his whole body. And that was it. He recovered from it. So in that case, I used the homeopathic sort of like a vaccine to kind of get his immune system ready for this illness. And so it's actually the frequency of the herpes shingles virus to treat the chickenpox. You can use the same thing with Lyme spirochetes. Take the frequency of Borrelia, the frequency of Rocky Mountain spotted fever, frequency of co-infections of parasites, and put a little of these remedies under your tongue, and it basically sends a message to your body to rid your body of mercury, rid your body of Borrelia, and you just keep taking that remedy, and then you start to detox. And then you can get well by lowering the toxic burden. If it was just one bacteria, we wouldn't be sick, but usually there's a lot of stuff going on.
So how do you define Lyme disease?
Well, this may be a little controversial. I don't like the word Lyme disease. I don't like to tell I don't like that to become their identity. So if you came to see me and you're sitting in front of me, Rich, and you have a symptom profile, and you say you've never known that you had Lyme, and I'm the one to tell you, I don't want then your Rich Lyme. You know, so I don't love to. So basically, what I'm saying is I'm detecting some bacteria. The good news, I'm detecting some bacteria that's correlated with many of your symptoms. The bad news is it takes some time to rid it. It could take 6 months to a year to get back to where you want to be, or even longer, depending on how you're supporting your immune system and your diet and the therapies. But the good news is your body has the capacity to heal with the right approach. And using homeopathics, using herbs, using nutrition, using different therapies, I believe is the approach that's really going to help the patients get well.
Okay, so you're in the Dr. Alan McDonald camp, which is, and he's one of our mentors, by the way. Where you think we should divorce from the term Lyme. The conversation between a practitioner and a patient should be one where there is a discussion of what the underlying challenges would be, microbial challenges, for example, in this case, and there would be a description of what tools are available to help the patient overcome the challenge, but you don't necessarily think it's a good idea to label that Lyme disease, for example.
I don't, and I know that can be, you know, provoking for a lot of your listeners who finally got answers when they were told they have Lyme disease. But for example, I had a patient not too long ago that it was the first time I had seen this gentleman. He had seen some of my colleagues, and I'm looking at his symptom profile that day, and he had nothing to complain about. He had zeros and ones of all of our questionnaire, and he's come in and just, you know, he's so depressed, and I'm Lyme, and I've had Lyme. Told me his whole, you know, sad story, 10, 15 years of having Lyme. I test him. I don't find anything. The only thing I found was a gluten sensitivity. He looked fantastic. And I'm like, I don't want you to say my Lyme anymore. We had a whole discussion about, you are not Lyme, and you are well, and we'll recheck it in a few months and make sure. But so I think that can be dangerous. And even for things, you know, for cancer, for any diagnosis, that it can become your identity. But at the same time, you do need answers. So, but yeah, Rich, I believe that almost every person has been exposed to Lyme by this point. I mean, we know that mosquitoes carry Lyme disease. And in Georgia, talk about mosquitoes. I mean, I can get the mail and get 6 mosquito bites.
So Heather, how do you feel about the Dr. McDonald approach, and I guess now the Dr. Honican approach, which is the goal is just to get you better. And in many cases, when we're sort of bunching a whole bunch of microbes together and calling it Lyme disease, or maybe defining one bacteria, one strain of one bacteria Lyme disease, and everything in between, that it's more harmful than helpful to have a label like that. Heather, what's your thought about that as a patient?
I agree, and I can see how I can say that now that I am out of the intensity and, you know, pain of when the Lyme was very, you know, it was taking over my life, and maybe I would have a different answer at that point, but because I'm past that in this moment and I can look back, I can absolutely see how not labeling could be so helpful, because then you start to go down a rabbit hole and you start to, you know, believe that you're sick and almost like living like you're sick. And of course you have to honor whatever is going on in your body, but there's just such a fine line between giving into a diagnosis, and this is just speaking from personal experience, giving into a diagnosis and understanding that you have something going on in your body and holding the belief that you can heal. Because for a long time, I think I lacked the belief that I could heal. And I don't know if that was because, when I was first diagnosed, there weren't many doctors offering Lyme treatments, and if they did, they were very, very expensive. So I would say that for me, I do believe that would have been very helpful.
So, Dr. Honican, one of the things we've observed on this podcast is that that Lyme seems to be a disease without a definition, at least without a consistent definition, right? You can look at the CDC's definition, and it's a disease caused by one strain of one bacteria, right?
Right.
And we know that that's almost never the case, right? It's generally multimicrobial, and certainly multisystemic. And then when we, as you probably know, one of our other mentors is Dr. Bill Rawls, and Dr. Rawls has his definition of Lyme disease, which has recently caused us to pivot our definition of Lyme disease, where we here at Tick Boot Camp have defined Lyme disease as polymicrobial, multisystemic, chronic infectious and/or post-infectious disease, right? And but what we've now heard from many of our listeners is, well, that's a word salad, and that makes us anxious too, right? So, I go back and forth about it, but most recently, what I've settled on, and I'd really like your reaction to this, is that I think what Lyme disease is like toxic shock syndrome, and I know that has a specific definition, but like you just become chronically toxic. Your body's overwhelmed with all the toxins, some of which may have come from a tick bite, many of which you just picked up through life. And it just
I just grew
over.
up learning. That's exactly it. I grew up learning about toxicity. That's what we do. Patients come in and we detox the body. And if I see about 8 patients a day, every case is different of what I find and what we're using to detox the body. For us, it's individual, because like you said, Lyme could present, it's a great imitator. It could be MS. I have had patients come in wheelchairs. It could be brain fog. And that tends to be one of the last symptoms to go, one of the most frustrating. Yeah. Oftentimes, Candida's involved with that. So when I, scan the body using bioenergetics, I have a form and I check the boxes. Are there bacteria? Are there viruses? Are there vaccine stress? Are there heavy metals? Are there food sensitivities? Which organs are stressed? Once I have all the results, then I can start testing to see what's going to work to get rid of it. And that's where it can be kind of fun. It's like, trying to solve a puzzle, doing some investigating, but what works for you, Heather, is not going to be the same thing that's going to work for Rich. We're all so individual, and also our symptoms, what some people are sensitive, and a detox will throw them, into bed for a week, and other people could run a marathon while they're detoxing. So everybody's different, and we have to kind of meet them where they're at financially, meet them where they're at with their education. How, maybe they're not ready to have an organic garden in their backyard the next day after they see me. So the first thing is to get them off of Coca-Cola, so we just have to meet the patients where they're at. But so the definition of Lyme, I think that really it's about your symptoms. If you have no energy, if you have pain, if you're not sleeping, if your brain fog is so severe that you can't read a chapter in a book, I would call that Lyme disease. But I think that as the symptoms improve, then someone can get in remission. And I believe that can happen by lowering the toxic burden. And the toxic burdens are everywhere. And it's hard because we can only do our best. And I think every day is a new day to make good choices. But what are we doing what drinking water are we drinking? What are we eating? What are we putting on our body? What are we using for our detergents? And I'm kind of amazed. I feel like patients are more open to this now than ever about that.
Look, I think one of the blessings of some of the political experiences that we're having, where we have an RFK who ran his entire campaign on overcoming chronic illnesses and repurposing campaign themes like making America healthy again, and just sort of bringing to the forefront all the challenges that we have with all of us overloading our bucket with toxins.
It's amazing. I have chills just talking about it. I'm blown away just how much it's going to help the country to really clean up the toxins, and how it's really going to help the patients, but also make my job easier. Because you should have a choice of whether you want to eat frosted flakes or organic eggs for breakfast, but at least have the frosted flakes not have chemicals that are illegal in other countries. So
I saw an interview with RFK recently, and he shared the difference between Fruit Loops in Canada and Fruit Loops in the United States. And that blew me away. I mean, it really blew me away how many more toxins they're allowed to use in America for the same exact brand of cereal. I mean, that's just amazing to me that we permit this. I mean, what's your reaction to that, Heather? I mean, I don't know if you came across that story, but literally the same brand of cereal, the same cereal, but they're literally composed of two different chemical profiles. Is that proper description, Dr. Honican? Just because it crosses the board. I mean, I'm just shocked that they're allowing our children to be poisoned with this stuff.
It's absolutely shocking. I went to the Children's Health Defense a couple of years ago, and the RFK started, and they did a little skit of what happens at a 2-month-old baby appointment at a pediatrician. And it was actually really sad because the person that did the skit, her baby actually died after a vaccine. But they did a skit, and they said, you're holding your baby's never left your arms, sleeping with you 24/7, nursing off you, and you have to hand the baby to the doctor, and they get 7 vaccines, DPT, MMR, and hepatitis in one day. And if you feel strongly in your gut that maybe they shouldn't, you're going to get gaslighted, you're going to get fired from the office, and just seeing that skit of what happens so that you can be armed and prepared. But RFK is getting the word out, and now these moms are going to hear the truth because they haven't heard the truth before. That maybe it's not. Why is it even necessary to get a tetanus vaccine at 2 months old? Is that baby walking around rusty nails? No, it's the baby's in your arms. So whether you believe in vaccines or not, there has to be some rhyme and reason behind what you're getting on each milestone in your life.
Yeah, so let's bookmark the vaccine issue for a second, and let's just talk about like the food that we're ingesting, and the plastics that are becoming a part of us and attaching to our cells, and the chemicals that those of you who may wear makeup are ingesting, and hair care products and deodorants, and I mean the list goes on and on of just the volume of chemicals and plastics and unhealthy toxins that one of the things that Bill Rawls said is that through human history we've never come in contact with these things. Like humans have never come in contact with this, and now we're just like it's becoming a part of us. I mean, just
oh yeah, like that movie about Teflon. What was that called? It was so good.
Oh yeah,
and how Teflon is in all of us forever. Even our children, it's going to be it's a forever chemical. And so we don't want to use Teflon. It sure is convenient to use it, but we don't want to use it. And so every day I think that we can really make choices. What are we filtering our shower for the fluoride and the chlorine? And then we get up, and is our coffee organic? And what are we putting in our coffee? And what are we putting on our skin? And just making the best choices. And I'm here to, help educate my patients, but I'm not here to make them feel bad. I'm just here to say, hey, what deodorant are you using? Here's another suggestion, and really get some indicators of what's going on with the body. But we also use a different modality for detecting imbalances and things like Lyme, spirochetes, called thermography.
What is it called?
It's called regulation thermography.
And
have you interviewed? So what that is, it's actually a test that involves the temperature of over 100 different points in the body. So it measures the temperature, which then correlates with what's in front of it. So let's say we measure all the different teeth, the breast, liver, kidneys, colon points, uterus points, prostate points, sinus points. And then you undergo what's called a cold challenge. Basically, you're standing in a room that's 68 degrees in your underwear for 10 minutes. And that causes stress to your autonomic nervous system. And then we remeasure all 100 points, and then we get a graph from that. And that graph generates a report and lets us know the top priorities of treatment. So let's say after you've stood in that room, your liver heats up 3 degrees instead of cooling a degree like it's supposed to under stress. That's a clue there's some major toxicity in the liver. So I'll look at a thermography and I can see the big picture. Is the number one priority Lyme spirochetes, or is the number one priority the adrenal glands or dysbiosis in the gut? And I get a priority. And in the thermography, usually we generally like to do once a year. Women are familiar with it for the breast health. So I can look at 13 criteria for suspicion in the breast. And if someone has just a few, then they're okay. And if they have more than that, we can work on the body, opening up the lymphatic system, working on the endocrine system. But thermography detection for the pattern of Lyme spirochetes is something that maybe your listeners have never heard about before.
Well,
or you.
What about you, Heather? Have you heard of that?
No.
You would love this test, Heather. You should come see it. So
okay,
we do the whole body and you get a thick report. It even goes into your dental health, your breast health, your whole body, and the priority of treatment. And so, for example, last time I did mine last November, so I'm due for one, but dental health was my top priority. And I've been clenching my teeth and I happened to be going to the dentist that day and had some periodontal stuff going on. So it just let me know, focus on your teeth, Alice, use your water pick, do some oil pulling. And so I'll remeasure that this month and see if that's resolved. But it's also a great way for me to gauge improvement. So let's say I look at a thermography and their patient's brain points are very cold and their liver is very blocked and they have lots of toxicity in the teeth, then usually that'll be due to Lyme spirochetes. And they're not getting circulation to their head. And so brain fog's a big symptom of Lyme spirochetes. And when you're under stress, your blood is supposed to shunt energy to the head and those spots should warm. So if they're cold and blocked in the head, then oftentimes the computer system will flag Lyme spirochetes, or at least to look at that. Sometimes it's mold, but we want to look for Lyme. So that's a really interesting test. And it's under $300. And my regulars, we do it once a year, typically to monitor the breast, but also look for those toxic burdens in the body and see which areas are stressed. It's pretty awesome.
So
regulation thermography.
How do you layer your testing? Because it appears you have a number of different testing protocols that you have available for your patient community. Give us, how do you layer them and when do you use them and what is it that you're learning as you layer these different protocols?
Okay, so if somebody sees us in person or remote, on every visit, we do the bioenergetic assessment. So we have 4 practitioners here. So you could send us your sample and say, I've had a lot of gas and bloating, I've had knee pain, I've had anxiety, and we can scan your DNA using the bioenergetic assessment, give you the results, send you the remedies. If someone is able to come in person, then we do a urinalysis, and then we do a thermography once a year. I'll repeat the thermography if I'm extra concerned. For example, I had a case where their lymphatic system, which should be open and clear, was 60% congested and blocked. So I had them come in for lymphatic drainage therapy and they did 5 treatments. I repeated the thermography and they went down to 15% blocked from 60%. And so that's a good way to see if we're doing the right therapy. Because Heather, you've probably done things that worked and some things that hasn't worked. We want to make sure we're doing the therapies that work.
Yeah.
And so the thermography can, if the lymphatic system's congested, we got to start there, or if the lymphatic system's open and they're not getting oxygen to their brain, then maybe we should do hyperbaric or ozone therapy. So yeah, Rich, so we always do the bioenergetic. The urinalysis is really looking at your terrain. So I think it was Pasteur that said, it's not the germ, it's the terrain. And that's kind of what we were saying earlier. Like if your immune system is really, really strong, then, the COVIDs, the Lyme, it may not take you down, but if your terrain, your liver, your lymph, your kidney, your gut is unhealthy, then that pathogen can knock you out.
All right. So let's come back to the oral health piece that you raised.
Yeah.
We've had some conversations with past guests about oral health. And largely what they focused on before you has been the fillings that dentists have used to fill cavities. But I really haven't heard anybody talk about oral health the way you have. So let's build that out, because I think that's an interesting issue that you raised. So,
Ooh, I love this question.
so
This is exciting for me.
are you
Um,
testing oral health because you believe that is an indication of gut health and that it's a part of our gut health system? Or are you testing oral health for some other reason when you're treating patients generally? And if you can narrow that down to Lyme patients, I'd like you to be able to do that as well.
Okay, well, Lyme spirochetes love the teeth and mouth and gums, and so they drill in there and can cause all kinds of infections. So we can detect that with the bioenergetics and the thermography. But so I'm an acupuncturist, and acupuncturists study how the whole body is connected. So in fact, each tooth is connected to a different meridian, and that meridian connects to the organ itself. So let's say you've had a root canal on a tooth that's connected to your gallbladder meridian, that eventually could lead to gallbladder disease. And we're able to see the imbalances in the teeth on the thermography and the bioenergetics. But if your oral health is good, so the medical profession recognizes that oral health can affect the heart, right? We know that you got to keep the bacteria low so that we don't get heart disease. The medical profession recognizes that oral health can affect diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis. Periodontal issues can affect the body systemically. Where there is even more to it is that each tooth can actually affect an organ. So a tooth with a silver amalgam filling, which is 50% mercury, one of the most toxic substances on the planet. If that is on a tooth that could affect, say, your liver and cause congestion in your liver, that could impact something like Lyme disease. I had a case where she came in for acupuncture for hip arthritis. We did 3 treatments and she didn't notice a change. And so I was like, okay, well, let's keep digging. This acupuncture isn't helping. She had done physical therapy and chiropractic. I looked in her mouth and there was a silver filling. In my tooth meridian chart, I promise you, it said hip for that tooth. She went and had the filling taken out, and I emailed her a few weeks ago, and she's feeling better. And
Wow.
that is an example of how your teeth health affects your whole body. And if your teeth is full of toxins, mercury, one of the most toxic substances, or Lyme bacteria, then that can affect your whole body systemically.
Wow. Wow. So one of the things that I'm really enjoying about this conversation is you're testing the entire body.
Yes.
And one of the things we've seen as a pattern in this podcast is generally our patient community, and I'm not rooting for one type of practitioner or another, but generally our patient community believes that they get a better outcome if they're working with a naturopathic doctor rather than an allopathic doctor. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Is that because those of you who are trained in the naturopathic arena are really holistic practitioners and you're treating the whole person and you're really looking at terrain as opposed to the hyper specialization that is a part of the allopathic training and actually the Pasteur philosophy that there's one bug causing one illness and that they're just constantly seeking out the bugs rather than treating the body. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, as I went to acupuncture school and naturopathic school, it's all about finding the root cause, treating the whole person, treating the body as an individual, and using remedies that don't have side effects. That is the goal. And really trying to figure out the root cause and lower the toxic burden. So if we can, clean the liver out, clean the lymphatic system out, heal the gut, then we can get well. And that's really treating the whole body. And something like the lymphatic system, I have heard that is barely touched on in medical school. Such an important system. that gets really congested with toxins, but also it's a system that flows upward. So what if someone's sitting all day? They're not moving their lymphatic system, and something like exercise or rebounding or getting lymphatic work, lymphatic drainage massages is going to be important. Sweating is going to be important for the lymphatic system, getting in a sauna and sweating. And so medical doctors don't really, talk about detoxing the body and the lymphatic system. Also the liver, for example, there's a place, of course we want to know if you have a tumor. Of course we want to, check your liver enzymes, but your liver requires to detoxify antioxidants. The liver requires to detoxify amino acid conjugation, glutathione, sulfation, methylation. So that all of that is through nutrition. So if you go to doctors and they don't talk to you about nutrition, how is your liver going to do what it needs to do if you're not getting those right nutrients? What if you only eat Chick-fil-A and that's all that you eat and you're not getting amino acids and antioxidants like blueberries and spinach and sulfurous vegetables that help with sulfation? Then if that's not discussed, and the liver has such a big job to get rid of these poisons we've been talking about every single day, the plastics that affect the liver, that are xenoestrogens, then that's why I think that the patients are getting better when they're seeing the naturopaths, is because they're not just looking for one lab number on a test with the right pharmaceutical to match it. They're really trying to see the whole body. What's gonna uncongest the liver, the lymphatic, the kidneys, and the gut.
So has it been your experience that people who are ill with chronic Lyme disease, it's the treatment protocol is largely assisting them with identifying where they're toxic and then helping them to detoxify either that portion of their body or that system in their body, and then their body will then be able to manage the microbes?
Yes. We all have microbes. We have more bacteria than stars in the galaxy. So we got to manage the microbes. Then, like what we were saying earlier, chemicals and metals, which are terribly toxic, we got to manage those. So I'm able to test, okay, which organs are stressed, what toxins are present, what nutrients are low, and what foods should you avoid to get well. Then what remedies are going to help you to do that, and then the lifestyle suggestions. So that's what a naturopath does.
But the remedies are all designed to detoxify, right? They're not designed to kill the microbes. It's designed to resolve a
little bit of both. I mean, when you take something like olive leaf extract, that does help to kill fungus, bacteria, and viruses, but the side effect of that natural herb that I believe came from the earth that God made might be that you might feel a little tired because you're detoxing a virus. The side effect isn't going to be because the remedy is toxic. So we like the homeopathic remedies send messages to your body to detox using the frequency of that substance. So if it's Borrelia, there's a frequency of Borrelia. If it's Epstein-Barr virus, there's a frequency of Epstein-Barr virus. But then we'll use different nutrients, like, for example, monolaurin, lauricidin, that's derived from coconut oil, is great for viruses and helps biofilm. Or we'll look for herbs like Japanese knotweed or cryptolepis to see which ones are going to attack, antibacterial, which ones are going to attack the microbes. And then we're going to look to see what's going to support the liver and lymph and kidneys, different drainage remedies, so that our goal is for the patients never to feel bad. Our goal is always for the patient to feel better. Sometimes you got to go through a little bit of feeling bad before you get better. And oftentimes it'll be your chief complaint. So if you're really tired, you might feel a little more tired for a few days starting a new detox. Or if your chief complaint is anxiety, you might feel a little more anxious. And that's what's called a healing crisis or Herxheimer reaction.
So one of the things that Heather shared with us a little bit earlier was that one of the challenges that she had was a mindset challenge, that she didn't believe that she could get better. And she had to overcome that in order to be able to move forward on her healing journey. Do you think part of the reason why people may not have a mindset where they believe they can heal is because we don't really understand who we are? And what I mean by that is, I heard someone recently describe us as a bag of bugs. In fact, when I was at the ILAS conference, somebody described us as a bag of bugs and suggested that we are more, if you counted up our cells versus the microbes that we are harboring in our body, that the microbes we have in our body outnumber us and our cells by a substantial percentage. And if that's true, if that really is true, and that and we had an understanding of ourselves as more non-us than us, maybe we'd also have an understanding that what we need to do is we need to get in balance rather than trying to kill things. So give me your perspective on that from a mindset standpoint, whereas if we have a better understanding of who we are and what our relationship is with our own microbiome, that perhaps we would be able to have a better understanding of what the goals are, and then have a better understanding and have a better mindset about the likelihood of us healing.
Okay, well, if you are alive, then you're able to detox, right? Because or else you'd be dead. So you're able to detox, but if the toxins, like you said, the microbes take over too much, that's when the symptoms start. So the goal is to control the microbes, to control the toxins, to lower the toxic burden so that you feel better. And then once you start to feel better, you'll believe that the body can heal. So I think when you feel worse and worse and worse every day, it probably is hard to have that hope. And if someone's struggling with Lyme disease and they're feeling terrible, it's hard to believe they can get better. But if they start a protocol and say, you know what, I feel better today than I did yesterday, then that hope can come. And then having really someone to explain the body's capacity to heal, and the body can just be so miraculous. We're constantly regenerating. We have new stomach lining every 5 days or so. The nerves take the longest to regenerate, but our bodies are constantly healing. We have new skin all the time, new cells. And so things like homeopathy, natural remedies, they really kind of send messages, electricity to the body to tell it to heal itself. Kind of like what acupuncture does, giving the body energy, tapping into the body's electricity. Well, what's needed for that tissue to repair? Electrons, electricity. So some of the therapies that have really gotten popular lately, light therapies, sound therapies, all of that's energy healing. And so even the mindset is energy. You don't see the mindset, but you can, have positive affirmations and get a good support system. I think people that, struggle with Lyme disease, it can be really hard in a marriage. It can be hard in their relationships. And so maybe those people have to pick certain people they talk to about Lyme disease. Not everybody's going to understand.
Heather, what was your how did you ultimately overcome the belief issue, and how important was that from an energetic standpoint?
Okay. Well, a couple things happened. Once when I joined the practice and started learning about spirochetes, I started seeing my dad heal patients. I mean, I have patients now that say my dad would pray with them. And I've had some that used to be in wheelchairs, and they remember seeing him back in the 80s, and they're still, still devoted to us. And so I saw patients get well. And then also, I haven't mentioned yet, in about 2008, I had just been in practice a few years. My mom got sick, and this was wild because my mom, macrobiotic, healthy, no sugar lady, the healthiest person I ever met, started to feel bad. And she did remember a spider bite. So she did remember a spider bite on her hand, and otherwise she was completely healthy. Well, then she started to get some Bell's palsy and a little bit of shoulder pain. And then her hip started hurting so bad that she could barely get out of bed. So within a few weeks of this spider bite, she was not feeling well. She did go to an orthopedic who said nothing was wrong with her. And so we tested her, and my dad put her on a protocol. Back then, I think it was Cemento and silver argentin, different proteolytic enzymes. But she had gotten so sick that in the mornings, my dad had to lift her out of bed for her to walk up the stairs. And she took all the potions, all the herbs, all the remedies. And within 6 months, she was completely recovered. So this really did two things. One is like, wow, Lyme disease, these pathogens can take down even the healthiest person, right? But with the right tools, they can get better. So that really was, I think it happened for a reason for me to see that, to really see that I'm at the right place, that we really can help anybody with Lyme disease. I really believe that, but then they have to do the work, and they have to follow the diet and take the remedies and really believe in it too. I mean, you can't just say, well, I took that remedy twice, it didn't work. You got to give it some effort.
Heather, what can you share with us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't even know if initially I was aware that I had that belief. And I think that there were a few factors. So like when I was first diagnosed, the doctor, expressed like how sorry they were and how basically my life was over. I may have to go on unemployment. So that was instilled in me, which actually might have been a good thing because I remember leaving thinking that won't be me. It just won't. And but I think a part of that statement did stick with me. And it wasn't until I started practicing breath work that I realized I was never in my body. My nervous system was completely dysregulated. And in that moment, I was like, wow, like this is what it feels like to be in my body and to be calm. Because with Lyme, like as we're sharing all of the physical symptoms and the protocols, it can be overwhelming when you already don't feel well. And I think that that can be disruptive to the nervous system. And in that overwhelm, even if you're not aware, you may be taking on the belief that, I don't know if I can get better because there are all these things, and which ones do I follow? Which ones, this one, there's proof that it works, but it's not working for me. And then there you are again, like dysregulated, and spending more money. And I think to prioritize your nervous system and your mental and emotional, it's got to be number one. Because when I started practice, I keep talking about breath work, but it was in that moment where I was like, I am literally never in my body. And I was recognizing that there are free tools available for us that can really promote healing. And you just have to be open to them. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Heather. I mean, working with the nervous system is so important. If you see a bear and you're running from a bear, your adrenal glands are going to pump out hormones like crazy: cortisol, epinephrine, adrenaline, norepinephrine. And a lot of us are running from a bear all the time. I think men and women, but a lot of women are doing, working outside of the home and doing a lot of the home stuff, raising children. And if we're always having lots of babies, if we're running from that bear all the time, let's say you're eating a sandwich, you would throw that sucker down, right? You wouldn't be able to take a nap and run from a bear. So if you're in fight or flight, that's going to affect rest, digest, and detoxify. So I love that you said we got to start with the nervous system, because we got to calm down, take some breaths, support the nervous system, and really get the right support and go to someone that understands, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not going to be able to take 12 remedies. I'm only going to be able to take 3. What are the 3 best remedies for me? So I think that it's finding, because when you can't think and you're overwhelmed, you're not feeling well, doing the protocols is not easy. You need some hand holding for sure.
Yeah. And then, there's so much advice online, and there's I had to remove myself from like groups, and not because I think that they're absolutely helpful, but again, for me, every time I would try to read through, I just noticed like I'm more dysregulated, trying to find information or, a story of success that maybe I could follow. And I think that's what's beautiful also about what you're doing, because it just feels very gentle, and you are looking at the individual and not just like what you've learned from a book or your training. So I
We
really
have to be careful with
that.
Dr. Google. Dr. Google can be scary for sure. I might scan you and find a parasite that you got from eating sushi, and you Google it and it's like you're gonna die and you're not. So getting on the internet and searching can be terrifying for sure. So yeah, I'd like to tell patients, you know what, I'm detecting spirochetes. If you go home and Google it, you're gonna get a little overwhelmed, but we're gonna work on it. Don't worry. So I like to kind of calm people down down when I find it for sure. Because yeah, I love the idea of the breath work. I like to recommend acupuncture,
Oh,
whatever really.
Qigong.
Qigong, there you go.
I love Qigong. Yeah, that has been so helpful too. Yeah.
So, Dr. Honican, have you noticed any patterns that have been successfully used with your Lyme patients? So you did share with us that everyone's a bio individual. Everybody is genetically different. Everyone has different neural pathways. Everyone has a different microbiome. I mean, I know there's a lot more diversity with our microbiome than probably any other part of our body, but with all of that diversity, have you seen in your now experience, you look young, but it sounds like you've been around for a while. Have you seen any patterns or orders of treatment working with your Lyme patients?
Well, I think one thing I have learned is that I need to open up the avenues of elimination first. So if someone, for example, is constipated and they're not pooping, we got to get them pooping. If somebody doesn't move their body, we need to get them moving their body. And so if we try to detox all the Lyme bacteria, viruses, metals, chemicals all at once in one visit, it's going to be too hard on the body. So I have learned to go a little bit slow, meet somebody where they're at, where are they at physically, where they're at financially, where they're at emotionally. And the goal is to always for them to feel better on the next visit than they did the previous visit, and to keep plugging away. And sometimes you use remedies that can be like Band-Aids. If you're having a sore throat, you can take zinc lozenges and that might be helpful. And sometimes it's remedies really trying to get to the root cause. And yeah, so I just think that it is important to help the patients not feel overwhelmed, and to, especially when they're foggy and their nervous system is stressed. And it's great that all this information about Lyme is out there, but I think if somebody spends 3 months on a million different Facebook groups, my Lyme, they're not going to feel better. They need to get out of their own head. Go help somebody else. Get out, get some exercise, go be with a friend, and find something that gives you joy. Find a hobby, take up knitting or whatever that you're going to love, because I think that if you don't have joy, then you're not going to get better. We have to have, the adrenals love us to have joy. Our adrenal glands like us to have a routine, and eat around the same time, go to bed at the same time, have a good circadian rhythm, and to laugh and to have joy and to have friendships. So I think that when we become Lyme disease and we've lost our community and our friends, and that can be really, really dangerous. So it's important to make some effort to find connections and to have positivity.
Okay, so we interviewed at the ILAS conference Dr. Stephen Harris, brilliant man. He's actually writing a book entitled Order, the Order of Treatment. And when I was interviewing Dr. Harris, I shared with him that we had observed here at Tick Boot Camp that there does seem to be an order, and we've actually described that order as PARM, which is P is for prehabilitation, A is for assisting your body to reduce the microbes. Some would call it kill, but we take a more general approach. R is a rehabilitation, where you're rehabilitating your body and your brain and your spirit. And then the M would be the maintenance. So that would be the order. And it sounds like, as we're having this conversation together, that you're very much in line with what we've observed. So I'd like you to comment on that. So, for example, we do think there is a place to start, right? And like my brilliant co-host, we believe it really does have to start with regulating your nervous system, right? You have to make sure that you're out of the sympathetic expression of your nervous system, or your immune system simply can't work, right? I mean, so you really have to work on regulating your immune system and focusing on the psychological elements of this journey. But then there are these other pieces on the rehabilitation phase, like regulating your sleep. Right, and you talked about how you're trying to assist your patients with resetting their circadian level and having some good sleep hygiene, with going to bed at a certain time and getting up a certain time. Movement, right, where you are moving, especially because we do have certain systems in our body that seems like allopathic doctors aren't studying, but don't have a pump, and if we're not moving, we're not going to be able to detoxify certain parts of our system. the foods that you're eating, right? Because so we have to deal with these foods that have very little nutritional value in some cases, and are toxic in and of themselves. So we were talking about that, a little bit earlier. So there, we're starting to see these kinds of very specific things that folks should consider doing. Do you have that kind of sort of framework in your head that you use for everyone, or is the the various testing protocols you're using helping you to zero in on certain things differently with different people, even at a prehabilitation phase?
Yes, the different testing modalities help me to determine the order for sure. Because there's the gut, there's the brain, or both. Where do we start? And sometimes we got to start with the gut and work with leaky gut, rebuilding the gut. Maybe someone's taking a lot of antibiotics for Lyme, and we got to heal the gut, get rid of the candida. And sometimes it start with the brain, and sometimes both. So I can assess the systems, and usually my patients will get a detox homeopathic with some drainage support, some kind of antimicrobial if they have microbes, some kind of nutrients if they're, so someone is low in methylated B vitamins, I'll give them some methylation support, or if they're low in omegas, and then some kind of suggestions for diet and lifestyle. And so for you might be able to eat gluten and be fine, and for somebody else they might not. Sometimes people have to avoid all the inflammatory foods, but a lot of people will just having them start. I like to start simple. Like, okay, it looks like you're really sensitive to cow's milk. Why don't you try cutting out the creamer and the coffee and the ice cream? Maybe just have cheese now and again. Come back and see me, and let's see how you're doing. And so I think that, yes, we could all benefit from eating perfectly and eating paleo, but no one's going to do that 100% of the time. We all like to have some chips and salsa now and again, or a cocktail. So the idea is to really avoid the most inflammatory foods, and then you will get quicker the healthier your diet is. But I think that your body can handle some cheats now and again if you really do well most of the time.
Well, certainly when you get to the maintenance phase, you can cheat once in a while, but maybe
Yeah.
while you're dealing with this toxic overload, maybe
Yeah.
it's not the time to be cheating. Maybe we need to be a little bit more Spartan during that phase of our.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to do something like the Whole30. Have you ever done that before? The Whole30.
What is that?
The Whole30 is just the name of a 30-day detox that involves what you eat and don't eat. It's free. You just eat this, don't eat that. But it's basically paleo. It's no grains, no sugars, no alcohol, basically, fruits, vegetables, meat, nuts, and seeds for 30 days. And I think it's a good thing to do about twice a year. I like to do it in January, like everybody else, and then before the holidays, and it gets all the junk out, and you'll start feeling better. And then usually that helps with cravings for even a couple of months after. So that's just a nice suggestion. Why don't you do the Whole30, and then I'll see you back, something like that. And
Wow.
it's not easy, but if you roast a bunch of veggies and cook some chicken, it's not that hard.
So we've had some doctors share with us that when they've taken their patients through the detox protocol, which in many cases also includes detoxing the environment, making sure that there's no mold in the environment, and that a percentage of their patients heal from that alone. That once they go through this sort of early phase, they're able to heal, and their body is able to manage the microbes and kill the Lyme. Have you had that experience where you have a percentage of your patients get better just by you helping them to get through making some of these lifestyle changes?
Yeah, it's usually I'll see a patient, see him back in maybe 6 to 8 weeks for a follow-up. But on the first visit, I tell them after about 4 months is when you're really going to turn the corner. When I see you next visit, you're going to feel better, but it tends to be about 4 months of specific protocols. Then the patients will come in and say, I turned the corner. But for something like really Lyme disease, someone's really, really feeling crummy, it could take a year. But every day should be a little better than the day before. It's a 2-step forward, 1 step back. But if you're not feeling any improvements after 6 or 8 weeks, then we're not doing the right approach. And we always want the patients to be feeling better. And so sometimes there can be some stubborn symptoms like brain fog or neuropathy that can take more time. But the goal is to detox the body and not overwhelm the body. And I think that definitely lots of successes every day. And I, have patients that would go back to their doctor, say, oh, nope, we were wrong. You never had Lyme, or things like, we misdiagnosed, liver cancer or something like that. So, so I'm not here to say I can cure, but I think that the body really can heal with the right tools. And especially if you open up the elimination systems, the lymphatic, the kidneys, the liver, the colon.
So what type of patterns have you observed about the people who have more stubborn symptoms of Lyme disease? Meaning
I think that with the stubborn cases, there's a big emotional component. And maybe there was an early childhood trauma. Maybe somebody lost a child. Maybe, when there's, in Chinese medicine, we always talk about emotions. Every different emotions affect different organs. For example, anger affects the liver, and everybody gets angry. But if you have long-standing anger and bitterness, eventually your liver can get toxic. Or fear really affects the kidneys. And so long-standing fear can weaken the kidneys. And all emotions, if they are negative year after year after year, can eventually affect the heart. So I think that if somebody has been through a trauma, that can make that person not be able to recover from Lyme disease, as opposed to the next one. So I think that's a clue, is really working with emotions and the adrenals and the nervous system.
Have you observed any patterns with patients who have treated with other practitioners before they've come to you, having a longer journey than patients who have started out with working with you?
I think that sometimes it's a challenge when patients doctor hop, because they bring in hundreds and hundreds of supplements. They want me to look at all the labs from all the years of all the doctors that they've been to. They're already frustrated with how much money that they've spent. And those kind of cases can be tough. Sometimes I say, I have one now I can think of that I think goes to 5 different doctors. And I've said, you have too many cooks in the kitchen. This is overwhelming. I would never be able to take that many supplements. 4 or 5 tops.
But do you think that's because but by going on the doctor carousel, which is what we call it here at Sick Boot Camp, what it's doing is it's causing more nervous system dysregulation and overwhelm, and that's why it's harder to heal? Or is it just there's just so much going on and it's maybe adding to the toxicity? What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I mean, they must not have gotten better with the first doctors, and they try another one, and maybe they lost their belief or lost hope, or maybe they just haven't found the right connection, the right practitioner, the right tool, the right therapy. I think therapies are underutilized. Things like acupuncture. Heather, you mentioned qigong and breath work. We love to use ozone. I'm sure you've heard about that. We use an ozone sauna here called the Honican, and it's so amazing. It sits empty a lot of the time. I'm just blown away that people aren't in there, because it works so well. You just wipe out the strongest pathogen. And then the lymphatic drainage is really awesome. So these are things we can do in the clinic. We have foot baths, but a lot of these cool biohacking people are starting to get at home, saunas and red light therapy and things we've been talking about for a long time.
So I have another question I wanted to ask you since the beginning of our conversation, which is about antibiotics.
Okay.
And I think antibiotics are an unbelievably awesome technology, and I think many people have lived substantially longer lives as a result of this technology having been discovered. But I think it's technology that's being overused. I actually shared with some of the doctors I interviewed at the ILADS conference that I had antibiotics so often as a child. It was almost as often as we had bubble gum, right? And it tasted like bubble gum, right? I mean, we just had it all the time, and I didn't realize what impact that was having on my gut. So I have a 2-part question for you. First, do you believe that you've been healthier and been able to manage all of the microbes that you have because you've not taken antibiotics in your life? And
Yes.
2, do you believe that it's easier for you to help people overcome Lyme disease when they've come to you before they've taken antibiotics versus coming to you after they've taken antibiotics?
Okay, so the first question, yes, I think that antibiotics are life-saving miracle drugs for severe situations. So if you come down with a sore throat, try the natural remedies for 3 to 4 days. It doesn't get better, you can always do the antibiotics, as opposed to antibiotics being first approach. Save the antibiotics for the big guns. I had a patient whose knee was so swollen with cellulitis. I said, go get an antibiotic today. You could die. I mean, they are there to save us.
It's a heroic technology, right? So it should be
Yes,
heroic events, right?
exactly. Like it's a life saving. It was discovered from gangrene in World War II. We have to use these life saving drugs, but every time you have a sniffle, do you need antibiotics? No. Or even things like urinary tract. There's so many natural remedies, and these remedies have been around a long time, and that's what we used to do. We used to go to the apothecary and get a natural remedy before big pharma really took over. So and they work. So for me, I haven't had to take antibiotics, but I've also had a naturopathic nutrition shop at my disposal my whole life. So, but they're there. You can pop into different cool herb shops and get a little arsenal at home so that you have something to take. When I feel bad, I will start pounding herbs, echinacea, elderberry, zinc, whatever it might be. And usually 2 or 3 days later, I'm well. But I can't do nothing. You can't just lay around and eat ice cream. You're gonna need the antibiotic if you do that. So
now, how about the second part of my question, which is when you've treated patients who have used antibiotics versus treating patients who haven't used antibiotics, do you see a pattern of a longer or shorter path, or not?
Yeah. So I think if you called me and said, Atlas, it just pulled a tick off of me, I'm worried about Lyme disease, I would probably say, go get on 10 days of doxycycline, because you saw the tick. But most of the time, by the time they've come to me, the naturopath, I'm the last one they're going to see. They may have gotten bit by the tick or the spider or the mosquitoes or when they were a kid.
Or the flea.
Or the flea. I mean, just think about, dogs get tapeworms from fleas. Like, how can we not believe that we don't get toxins from insect bites?
We're certainly getting Bartonella from fleas.
We're getting Bartonella from fleas, and Bartonella comes from cat scratch.
So I interviewed one of the leading Bartonella experts we actually interviewed Dr. Ed Bartworth from NC State. He's also from Galaxy Labs, the founder of Galaxy Labs. And he actually described for us what is happening with cat scratch fever and Bartonella in particular. So what's happening is that the fleas are actually pooping, and in the flea poop is live Bartonella. And what's happening is the cats are now, getting it on their claws, and then when they either need you or they scratch you, what's happening is the bacteria is now getting into your bloodstream. But you can actually get Bartonella from the fleas biting you themselves, meaning the fleas come come into the house with your dogs and cats, and then the fleas are biting you, and now we're getting Bart. Now, Bart is a horrific bacteria, which causes all kinds of challenging mental health issues that are very difficult to overcome. So what we're seeing is, for a long time here at Tick Boot Camp, our name is Tick Boot Camp, we focused on tick bites, right?
Right.
And as we're learning more and more about this, we're getting microbes from a number of different sources, and what just happens is they just sort of dogpile. Now, is that because the Borrelia is such an aggressive bacteria and it's great at colonizing with other kinds of bugs that sort of becomes, the straw that breaks the camel's back, which is what some doctors have argued to us before. And then, and it's working with all these other germs? Or is it just sort of like a series of insults that we're getting from all kinds of vectors that finally just overwhelm us when we have, when we're harboring plastics and chemicals and, all kinds of really foreign, substances in our body. And then we have all these other microbes, coming in, and we just break down.
Just a buildup of toxins, 100%. So just like with COVID, a lot of people have been coming in ever since I had COVID, XYZ, and that was a new pathogen we've had to deal with. And I've seen a lot of Lyme disease emerge from that too. I'll scan them and they'll be showing Lyme bacteria, because I think the COVID wiped out their immune system, and then those bacteria they already had, started to proliferate and drill into their connective tissues. So yes, I think it's both. I think that the pathogen can be so strong that it can take us out, or we have so many toxins that we just need to detoxify the body. So we got to work with both. We have to think about toxins, and I think that your listeners are. I think people are really, wisening up when it comes to toxicity, that we can't just expect to live a long, healthy life if we don't pay attention to what we put into our bodies.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the arguments that Dr. Marty Ross made to us, and it was really, I really enjoyed the way he made the argument, because I was co-hosting with Matt at the time, and Dr. Ross gave him a really good slap, so it was really enjoyable to watch it. And he had argued that Matt was talking about reducing all the microbes together, and one of the things that Ross had said was in many cases when he was able to help folks overcome the Borrelia, that their body was able to manage everything else, and it was able to to get healthy. And I'm just wondering whether or not that just sort of like maybe Borrelia is that piece that causes it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, but we're sort of harboring all these other microbes because we're picking them up all over the place. I mean, again, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Have you seen?
My dad believed that Dr. Anderson, before COVID, before he would, test people, and he would find Epstein-Barr virus, which is, the virus that causes mono. And he would find, just by detoxing that virus, even though they may have herpes simplex viruses, HSV, tons of other viruses, that they would get well. So it's almost like detoxing that major toxic burdens, and the rest of the toxins follow. And so that's kind of on lines with what you were saying. If we can find the major toxic burden and eliminate that, then maybe the liver, lymph, and kidneys can handle the rest.
Yeah. I mean, so that's really, from the standpoint of an order, right? So that what we're first doing is just sort of like becoming more hygienic. I'll just use that term, more, we're being more careful with our sleep, and we're being more careful with our food, and we're being more careful with our movement, and we're being more careful with, who we're interacting with, so that we're not with spending time with energy vampires, so we're in more healthy social environments, right? And we're getting our we're sort of like reducing all of that load. We're trying to de-stress, so that our we're learning more about our brain, and we're learning more about how to stay out of triggering the survival software, right? We get through that process. In some cases people can get better. Well, maybe we now get to the next step, right? And with some of the testing that you can do, you can find the major microbes that are presenting. Maybe it's a spirochete, maybe it's a virus, like Epstein-Barr, maybe what it is, and you focus on that, and then maybe that allows our immune system to take over.
Mold. Mold's another example. I had a case recently. She'd only been in Georgia a year, from Arizona, and all of her joints started hurting, and she got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I was wondering about Lyme, but really she was testing more positive for mold. I was like, do you have a basement? Yes. Do you have a dehumidifier? No. And I'm like, you need to get your house checked out.
Yeah.
You're in a hot, humid climate now. And she never had thought about it. So I sent, our clean air guy out there, and her house was full of mold. So it's like, everybody's different. Now if getting out of the moldy environment, then her body probably could handle the other toxins, and the joint pain could go away.
Yeah. But let's talk about, you've been very generous with your time, and this has been a great interview. So thank you so much for everything. Let me ask you about the neural pathways, and the neural pathways that develop when you're sick, so that your body can, deal with the illness, and then needing to alter the neural pathways so that you're not symptomatic. We've interviewed many guests. I think Rachel Leland is sort of the most powerful example of this, where they continue to be symptomatic even though the microlobe had been reduced through various forms of testing, but they're still symptomatic. Have you seen that in your practice, and have you made any recommendations about neural retraining for your patients? And do you have any tools that you use for that phase of recovery?
My colleague, Dr. Anna Powers, she also works at a place called the Amen Clinic, and we do neurofeedback. And she does brain mapping and neurofeedback, and she actually prefers, I refer her clients after we've done a lot of detox. So after we lower the Lyme, Borrelia, and the molds, and the viral loads, they're going to have better response to that retraining the neural pathways with that treatment called neurofeedback. So we do offer that. That's probably the best one, I would say, besides acupuncture, because acupuncture really does help the sympathetic nervous system. You will relax, you will fall asleep during the treatment, and you will feel better. So that's another system to help balance the neural pathways.
Oh, so help me with that. So tell me again. I know that's what you have your doctorate in, right? It's in acupuncture. How does acupuncture help to retrain your neural pathways?
Well, I mean, they definitely studied that acupuncture helps to lower cortisol, helps to improve serotonin and dopamine, and lowering cortisol helps with pain. It helps to calm the sympathetic nervous system. There's many acupuncture points in the ear that are good for addictions and for PTSD, and so all of that helps. If you can get the system calmed down, then your body can relax and heal. So that's a great thing. Acupuncture is a little hard to explain. It's a 4-year degree, and we start talking about balance, yin and yang, the elements, different seasons. So for example, somebody with Lyme comes in, I'm not treating Lyme disease, I'm treating their imbalances. And so if you come in and your knee is swollen and hot, I'm treating wind, damp, heat in the knee. If you come in and your blood pressure is through the roof, I'm treating liver fire. So all of that could be Lyme disease, but it's a different way of treating the body, calming the liver, clearing heat, using herbs and homeopathics and different acupuncture points for that. So both naturopathic medicine and traditional Chinese medicine is about the root cause and finding the balance, but just different approaches. So I kind of vacillate between the two. I only do acupuncture 1 day a week and do the testing the other 3. I hope we have another acupuncturist, but yeah, that's a great modality that your patients should try to help reset the nervous system. Neurofeedback as well. Really good for anxiety, ruminating thoughts, apathy.
Fascinating. This is fascinating stuff. So I'm going to ask you one more series of questions, and then we'll let Heather ask you the final question. As the guest co-host, they always get to ask the final question.
Right.
Once you've gotten a patient through the challenges, you've prepared their body for bringing their microbial system into balance. They ultimately bring their microbial system into balance. You offer them various protocols to help them to retrain their brain, whether it be through a referral to the aiming clinic or the tools that you have available to you through acupuncture. What types of tools do you help your patients develop so they can now maintain a healthy lifestyle and not get themselves into a position where they may relapse?
Well, I think it's everything that we've been talking about. Like, what are we eating? Is it real food? Do you know what it is? If it's an apple, it's an apple. If it's something in your pantry and you don't phosphoric this or that, it's not real food. So eat real food. What are you putting on your body? What are you using for your deodorant? What are you drinking out of? Are you drinking purified water? Are you spraying your house with pesticides? Really trying to lower that environment so that your body can handle day-to-day stressors that you can't control. And then I just have them come in once a quarter for a little tune-up, a little checkup. So once they're feeling better, let's say it's Lyme disease, let's say after 6 months, we're really feeling like we're in remission. You're able to function, you're able to work again, you're able to sleep, you have enough energy to walk around the block. Then just come in now and again for a tune-up, because unfortunately we're going to get exposed to more toxins and more stressors.
So what does the tune-up look like? Is that using some of the testing protocols that you use so that you can identify whether or not there is again a detoxification issue or what does that look like, the tune-up?
Yes, we always do the bioenergetic. So they fill out a symptom profile, and why did they come in? Well, I came in because I haven't been sleeping. All right, let's do the bioenergetic tune-up. Well, it looks like that your adrenals are stressed, and we're going to use some herbs, and we're going to try some acupuncture. Or I came in to see you because I've had diarrhea for 6 weeks and I went on a cruise. Okay, well, I found Giardia bacteria, and we're going to use this antimicrobial, put you on a probiotic, put you on antiparasitic, see you back in 6 weeks. So the goal is always to find the pathogen, to get to the root cause, to use remedies that aren't going to do any harm, and to get them feeling better. Tools for them to do on their own. Some of my patients have kind of learned to do some muscle testing on themselves, where they can ask their own body different questions. And, that sounds a little woo-woo, but they can do that. And that's good to do if you're just asking a couple things. You wouldn't be able to, do a whole assessment like that. But, is this vitamin D supplement good for me or not? They can do that type of testing. And then I think that it is just some kind of detox, whether it be a sauna a few times a week, or doing the Honican, like I mentioned, doing foot baths, doing something to kind of assist the body, because it just gets overwhelmed, and there are some tools out there that are pretty affordable.
So I've really enjoyed this interview. I want to make one final observation before Heather asks the final question, which is, I really appreciate the way you sort of brought us full circle here, where you were taking the position that you don't really like to use the word Lyme disease, because for you, you're testing the entire body and you're just looking for whatever the issue is. And it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just finding what it is in the individual patient that you have before you, and then working with them to bring their body back into balance. And if it's a spirochete, it's a spirochete. If it's not a spirochete, it's not a spirochete. And it doesn't really matter to you. And that's why you don't like labels. It's not because necessarily because it creates an unhealthy identity in your patients, but because it may block your ability to think through what you need to think through and determine what the patient needs best. Is that a fair way of sort of bringing us back to full circle for the?
Absolutely, that was perfect.
All right, so I appreciate that. This has really been a beautiful interview, and this has really been helpful for me to understand the dangers from a practitioner standpoint of labels of any sort, certainly of a word like Lyme disease. So thank you.
Yeah, and your listeners, check out our website, Longevity Health Center. We have a remote test called biosample analysis, and it's like $250. We are very affordable. We're small mom and pop shop, and we really want patients to get well, and you can get the results for that price. So I think that it's a great lab to use, the bioenergetics, and
Yes.
and their listeners can find us, and we can get the results to them, very quickly.
So let's give that information to folks before
Okay.
having you the final question. So what is the name of your website, and are there other ways for folks to either get in touch with your practice or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so our website is longevityhealthcenter.com. Fantastic website explaining all about what we do. And then you can click on, our services, and it tells about the remote testing, the biosample analysis, and then you'll call in. We only take patients after they've called in and talked to our new patient coordinator. So you're going to get a personal phone call to all about your case. And then she's going to know which practitioner that patient should see, because we specialize in different areas. We have pediatrics, we have hormones, we have Lyme, we have mold, things like that. So you're going to get very individualized care, and then you're going to have patient coordinators be calling you and really keeping up with you. And we always answer the phone and in our emails here. So yeah, check us out. We have a great website. And Heather, what you got for me?
Well, I would love to leave our listeners feeling empowered and calm. So whether it's a quote or a piece of advice or a suggestion, what can we leave our listeners with? Or maybe something that you already implement in your practice. But how can we leave our listeners feeling empowered?
Yeah, I think that if you make any step in the positive direction, it's a positive step towards health. So make goals that are achievable. First goal is tomorrow I'm going to drink more water. Make that goal, keep up that goal. The next day, I can't hardly move my body. I'm going to walk for 2 minutes today. So I think that it is important to make goals for our lifestyle and make reasonable goals that we can achieve, and just really believe that God designed us perfectly with the capacity to heal, and we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I think that all your listeners can get better if they find the right person to work with, and that your body can detox, or else we wouldn't be alive. So we can do this. We can beat Lyme. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I had a great time.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Heather,
you.
for joining us as a co-host, and Dr. Honican, thank you for this really, really enjoyable conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.